Hello and welcome to Badger Talks Live, which brings exciting happenings, resources, and talent from your UW flagship campus to the people of Wisconsin and beyond. I am Deja Mason, a 2017 graduate of the Wisconsin School of Business, currently pursuing my master's degree in Arts and Creative Enterprise Leadership from the Bolz Center for Arts Administration, also in the Wisconsin School of Business. Today, we will be hearing from Interim Co-Director for the Bolz Center, Sarah Marty, who will be talking about the Broadway blockbuster Hamilton, an American Musical. This cultural phenomenon has appealed to a diverse audience far beyond the borders of New York City. The success of the show is changing what theater is being produced, what stories are being told, and who is telling them. Being one of Sarah's students, I can tell you that her love for the arts and creating inclusive spaces is a major part of the work she does and continues to exemplify. Sarah Marty also teaches classes on arts entrepreneurship and arts leadership for University of Wisconsin-Madison, Through her work as co-director of the Holding History program, she mentors students as they connect the history and media to the arts and crafting of bookmaking. As producing artistic director of Four Seasons Theater in Madison, she helps bring musical theater performances to stages, libraries, and retirement communities across Madison, Wisconsin. Please welcome Sarah Marty.
Thank you, Deja, for the lovely introduction. And thank you, Fran, for the invitation to speak as part of the Badger Talk series. Over these past few months, I've so enjoyed being able to tune in live or check out talks that I missed on YouTube and to learn about new and interesting things and to see the Wisconsin idea in action through UW Connects. Today, my talk about Hamilton is about 20 minutes long, so there'll be plenty of time for a Q&A afterwards. You can enter your questions in the chat bar at any time, and our moderator, Fran, will save those for afterwards for a lively discussion. With that in mind, a few key questions for you to keep at the forefront as we spend the next hour, I guess, or 45 minutes or so together. The first is, what's the big deal about Hamilton? The second is, why is Hamilton so popular? And lastly, why does it matter? Why do we care, right? So in the next few minutes together, we'll focus on the groundbreaking Broadway and cultural phenomenon, Hamilton, an American Musical, and its genius creator, MacArthur Fellow Lin-Manuel Miranda. Fusing classical musical theater and poetry with pop music and hip hop, Hamilton exemplifies the highest excellence in the genre and is changing the very nature of the art form, what stories are being told, and who is telling them. In a 2016 article for The Guardian, Public Humanities and Literature fellow Sarah Churchwell wrote, quote, "Hamilton is the kind of transformative theatrical experience that has only happened a few times in the history of American musicals. It joins the likes of Showboat, Oklahoma, and West Side Story as game changers, innovative productions that have forever redefined what came after them," end quote. It's a bold claim, to be sure, and one that is proven to be true on a multitude of levels. First, the show is a masterpiece of musical theater and the 14 plus art forms that includes: music, lyrics, dance, orchestrations, staging, costume design, lighting design, scenic design, props design, theater technology, and so much more. Second, Hamilton is an entire industry with ripple effects that go far beyond the footlights of Broadway. It's inspired exhibitions and programs at libraries and museums, historical sites across the country, and inspired many fans to create their own works of art as well. Third, it's inspired generations, from elementary school students to lifelong learners, to learn about American history, to go beyond what our textbooks told us, and to read primary sources, to listen, to learn, and to examine. Fourth, it's a financial blockbuster that before the current pandemic played to packed houses in New York City and London, and also supported 4 national touring companies performing in art centers across North America, and one that is now surely breaking streaming records on Disney+. Fifth, it's a conversation-sparking artwork permeated with social commentary on the foundation of the nation and how the process of democracy was just as fraught then as it is now. And finally, perhaps the greatest impact of all, it challenges us to think differently about history and legacy, on both a personal level and as Americans, and to ask who lives, who dies, and who tells your story. During Hamilton's first year, Lin-Manuel Miranda, composer, librettist, and performer, appeared in countless print and digital publications and was interviewed by major radio and television news programs. Miranda was everywhere, and often in places you're more likely to see the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or a blockbuster movie star. How many Broadway artists end up on the cover of Rolling Stone, Time Magazine, Smithsonian Magazine, and GQ in the same year? Couple this widespread exposure with the concurrent growth of social media platforms, in particular Twitter, and its creators' collective leverage of their personal accounts, and Hamilton quickly surpassed the reach of any prior theatrical production. Children dressed as historical figures / characters from the show for Halloween. My then 87-year-old grandmother, who lives on the home farm in Monticello, Wisconsin, asked me if I knew anything about this Lin-Manuel Miranda guy because she'd seen him on CBS Sunday morning. Part of Miranda's genius is that he's an astute business person and is a better public relations spokesperson and marketer than most who hold those titles at Fortune 500 companies. As a storyteller, he knows how to reach an audience and how to engage with and build his fan base. On May 12th, 2009, he was invited to perform music from In the Heights at the White House Evening of Poetry, Music, and Spoken Word. The first ever such event, one that was conceived by and hosted by President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. Instead, he performed the first song from, quote, the Hamilton mixtape, an early version of what would later become Alexander Hamilton, the show's opening number. I'm sure many of us have seen that video. He's nervous. The audience giggles when he mentions that he's writing an album of songs about, quote, a man who embodies hip hop, Alexander Hamilton, end quote. It's a brilliant move. At the time, it's the only song he'd written, but here on a national stage, he was willing to risk proof of concept, knowing it could build interest in the new project. Over the 6 years that Hamilton evolved from a song cycle or an album called the Hamilton Mixtape into the complex, beautiful theatrical blockbuster production, Hamilton, an American Musical, Lin shared every moment of the process with his fans via his prolific Twitter account. Whether agonizing over a lyric, sharing his excitement of working on a new moment in the show, or waking up in the middle of the night with a new idea, he invited everyone into the process. His dream project became our dream project. And in doing so, he built momentum and interest, which led to funding and a guaranteed audience for, at the very least, the eventual off-Broadway production. Beyond that, he had the uncanny ability to remain earnest and genuine in every interview and to make you as the listener feel like everything he said is the first time he had that thought and spoke it. In reality, while he is genuinely excited, he also is shrewd and sticks to talking points that resonate. The foremost of these, which we're going to unpack a little bit later in this talk, is Hamilton is a story of America then, told by America now. He shares how he recognized parallels between the story of Alexander Hamilton and his own father's story of immigration from Puerto Rico to New York City, learning English and attending law school and becoming a civic leader in the community. All of his interviews are a masterclass for nonprofit leaders, for chancellors at universities, for social entrepreneurs, and for business people on how to talk about mission-driven work in a compelling way. The success of Hamilton, the Grammy Award-winning cast recording, the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, the Tony Awards, and the fact that it's been embraced by contemporary popular culture and multitudes of generations is truly lightning in a bottle. It's a phenomenon that we will never see again. So why is Hamilton so popular? The Venn diagram of Hamilton audiences is pretty unusual as it brings together musical theater fans, hip hop music and dance fans, and history buffs. So we're going to start with musical theater and the show West Side Story. Musical theater is the heart of my career as producing artistic director of Four Seasons Theater, and West Side Story is one of my all-time favorite musicals, one that I first saw when I was in high school as part of my high school English class. So when I first saw Hamilton, I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't a huge fan of hip hop music or dance. I hadn't seen In the Heights yet. And Hamilton was billed as this hip hop musical. And that, quite frankly, didn't seem like it would be my cup of tea, even as a musical theater fan. But a close friend's aunt was a subscriber at the Public, and she gave us tickets to the February 8th, 2015 performance. The off-Broadway show ran in a space called the Newman Theater in the Public Theater Complex. It's this incredible venue that has a full Broadway-sized proscenium stage, so a big, huge stage, but only 299 seats in the audience. Just think about that, 299 people at each performance at a show that takes nearly 100 people to run, with 21 cast members on stage, actor swings on standby, wardrobe and run crew backstage, light board and turntable operators, stage managers calling the show and taking care of the cast. And then you have all the front of house with house managers and ushers and box office staff and merchandise and concessions. To say the experience was magical is an understatement. You know, at the time, there were no production photos, there wasn't any video. I had no idea what to expect. The opening number, Alexander Hamilton, literally blew me away. It was like the first time I saw the 1961 film of West Side Story, a complex, fully artistically integrated story where no element was more important than the other. The music, the choreography, the staging were integrated seamlessly, and the lighting, costumes, and scenic elements fully support the story that was being told. This is the reason that I tell people not to judge Hamilton only by the cast recording. It's a musical, and a musical requires you to see a live performance, or if you're unable to do that, to see the film of a live performance and watch it on Disney Plus so you can see how all those elements come together. The parallels between West Side Story and Hamilton are plentiful, as the creators of Hamilton are steeped in musical theater history, both as fans of the genre and in their own experiences in high school and college training. Now, West Side Story was co-created by the collaborative team of Leonard Bernstein, music, Arthur Lawrence, book, Jerome Robbins, choreography, and Stephen Sondheim, lyrics. And it was a game changer in the genre, as it fully integrated all of those elements in the way that it told the story. It was also New York City then, the late 1950s, early 1960s. And it was about the conflicts between immigrant groups, Polish and Puerto Rican, and the fight for power. And I could go on and on about Hamilton and West Side Story, but that's another lecture for another time. As the opening number concluded, I was also struck by the fact that Alexander Hamilton was a lot like the prologue of West Side Story, which is actually the prologue of Romeo and Juliet, written by William Shakespeare, one of the greatest poets and playwrights ever to have walked the earth and written on a sheet of paper. We're going to take a short detour and talk about a subcategory of people who love theater, who love poetry, and who love stories about history. Many of these happen to be fans of Shakespeare. And thinking about that Alexander Hamilton and the prologue to Romeo and Juliet, the real genius in those two pieces is that you learn the entire story in a few minutes, but you stick around to see what happens. You still care. You stick around for another 2.5 hours, or Shakespeare, it might be 4.5, depending on if it's cut or not. So Shakespeare's plays, hip hop lyrics, and Hamilton were all written as spoken word, to be experienced through a performance first, through speaking and vocalization, and not as something that is read from a printed page. Oddly enough, most of us in high school encounter Shakespeare by being required to read a play in English class, even though audiences during his lifetime were much more likely to see a performance on stage, to hear the words, and share a communal theatrical experience than to ever have the opportunity to own and read a copy of the script. Now, Oscar Eustis, artistic director of the New York's Public Theater, the organization that produced the final year of workshops and the off-Broadway run of Hamilton, and the organization that actually produces Shakespeare in the Park in New York City, he explained how, like Shakespeare, Miranda took the language of the people and elevated it to art. In Shakespeare's case, he elevated it to iambic pentameter. In Lin-Manuel Miranda's case, he elevated it to hip hop and rap, and he ennobled it by turning it into verse and putting it at the center of the stage. That's exactly what Shakespeare was doing. That's a quote from Oscar Eustis. Shakespeare, like Miranda, was a champion of successful storytelling through verse, but the comparisons don't stop there. In my work at UW-Madison, I'm co-director of the Holding History program, which introduces rare book archives and special collections to students and community members. In this work with my colleague and co-director, Josh Calhoun, And in my own research as an academic, I've had the chance to work with quite a few primary source documents and materials. Among them is a book by Holinshed. So Shakespeare's history plays and great tragedies like Hamlet and Macbeth are adaptations of Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland, a comprehensive history of Britain that was originally published in 1577 and revised in 1587. Shakespeare took those stories that had been printed and shared and read by many and adapted them for the theatrical stage, much like Miranda took the 700 plus page book by Ron Chernow, which was itself based on thousands of primary source materials and the work of many other scholars. And Miranda adapted that Chernow distillation of history into the structure of a 2.5-hour musical. We often associate the term remix with hip hop culture, with sampling bass tracks or musical lyrics or a few measures of a melody and using them to create a new song. We can also think of remix with the work of Shakespeare and Lin-Manuel Miranda as remixing the work of others. With both Shakespeare and Miranda, the genius is not in the stories that are being told. They're not necessarily original stories. It's in how they tell them. And in Lin's case, the genius is that he's bringing together so many disparate sources. The book by Chernow, his love of the music of his youth, which is 1990s hip hop, and his love of listening to, performing in, and writing musical theater. Finally, one of the greatest similarities between William Shakespeare and Lin-Manuel Miranda, and one of the great appeals to playgoers and fans of Shakespeare, is the fact that both of those authors have the ability to address the history of a nation through the eyes of a central individual's experience. To see drama in the epic sweep of history, the violence of war, and the battle for power, and in the most human emotions and experiences. From the most important personal flight and plight, the struggle for love, unrequited love, lost love, to kingdoms rising and falling and worlds hanging in the balance. So we've got this idea of remix, of sampling a variety of sources and bringing together in a new work. And you might be asking, how does this remix happen in Hamilton? Well, many attribute the success of Hamilton to one person. And this is a mistake. Even though Lin-Manuel Miranda is credited with the music, the lyrics, the book, which is the script, he himself credits the cabinet. And you might be saying, who's the cabinet? So the cabinet is responsible for the fusion of all of these different art forms coming together, not only in Hamilton, but also in the earlier work in the Heights. So part of Miranda's genius is his ability to bring together this creative team that's greater than the sum of its parts, and it's comprised of similarly gifted individuals who are well-versed in a vast array of musical, theatrical, and dance styles. Just like Alexander Hamilton had John Lorenz, Lafayette, and Hercules Mulligan in the musical, Lin-Manuel Miranda has close aides and allies who are an integral part of the person he is and the work that he does. His band of brothers includes director Thomas Kail, music director and orchestrator Alex Lacamoire, and choreographer Andy Blankenbuehler. All grew up as fans of 1990s hip hop and maintained that enthusiasm for the genre while pursuing studies, classical studies, in their respective fields. This cabinet, this quartet, first collaborated on In the Heights, which was nominated for 13 Tony Awards in 2008 and won 4, Best Musical, Best Original Score, Best Choreography, and Best Orchestrations. And In the Heights was a fusion of classical dance, of musical theater background and history, of hip hop dance and spoken word, and of Western European art forms and Latino culture. So many, many things are coming together in that particular piece. In the case of Hamilton, it was Lacamoire and Kail who convinced Miranda that it was much bigger than just an album and that it could be a fully staged production. And it was Blankenbuehler whose incredible ability to tell story through movement brought musical theater dance and tap and classical ballet together with hip hop dance and elevated Hamilton from a soundtrack to an actual piece of musical theater. The key, sharing this wide-ranging vocabulary of sounds and lyrics and poetry and movement and a deep curiosity in bringing together seemingly opposing genres, is the spark that made Hamilton possible and sustained it over the 6 years from the idea to opening night. The friendship and professional integrity within the cabinet provided the trust and creative energy that Miranda needed to write the book and music and to get the financial backing to make it happen. In November 2015, Hamilton did something that no other Broadway show has ever done. It hit #1 on the Billboard chart for rap albums. And in 2018, the Kennedy Center Honors recognized the entire core creative team, the members of the cabinet, with a special award for being trailblazing creators of a transformative work that defies category. So why does it matter? Why do we care? Ben Brantley wrote in the New York Times that Hamilton is, among other things, about who owns history and who gets to be in charge of the narrative. The financial success of Hamilton has significantly impacted the kind of work that producers are willing to invest in and impacted casting on Broadway. Yes, we are starting to see more diversity on stage and in the offerings that were produced, but Hamilton accelerated that shift. The public theater, which workshopped and produced the off-Broadway production, is now on stable ground for decades to come and can use the royalties from all of that initial investment to continue to support the development of new works. Beyond that, seeing more actors, composers, and artists of color succeed in the field reminds us that the actual overall demographics of our country are changing. And seeing yourself on stage as president, as a founding father, as the woman who founded the first public orphanage in the country can, as a young person, as an audience member, as an artist, have an immeasurable impact. Representation truly matters. While theater audiences may not be yet as diverse as the overall population of the country, the success of a show like Hamilton encourages us all to try something we are not familiar with, whether it's hip hop or it's musical theater. Since Hamilton opened off Broadway in 2015, research for Broadway and Broadway touring productions has shown a 130% increase in attendees ages 18 to 44, and the average age of subscribers has fallen by 4 years. While, according to Broadway League, about 80% of Broadway ticket buyers are white, the overall percentages of Black, Latino, and Asian theater goers has risen significantly over the last couple of years. Hamilton was also groundbreaking in their EduHam program, making tens of thousands of tickets available to schools for a low price of $10 each, and partnering with the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History to create an integrated curriculum available for schools, teachers, and families. As the stories that are told and the artists telling them continue to more accurately reflect the makeup of our country, this number will only grow. In closing, Hamilton American Musical is truly a work of genius and an American remix. It combines musical theater, which is an American art form rooted in Western classical music, with hip hop, an American genre of music and culture that grew out of expressive forms of African American and Caribbean immigrant artists in the Bronx in the 1980s. It's also both the story of the founding of the country and the revolution, and a vivid commentary on contemporary issues in America today. It both builds on the past and looks to the future. The opening number of the show features the entire cast in parchment-colored costumes, blank sheets of paper, their stories untold, their character not yet revealed. Will they matter? Or will they be remembered? The hip-hop underdog story of Alexander Hamilton celebrates the idea of this land of opportunity while shining a spotlight on our history and on our society then and now. Hamilton, an American musical, challenges us to ask, what stories have been told and celebrated? What stories and experiences have been left out? Who has opportunity in our country? And who has the power to make the decisions that affect the allocation of resources in our communities? Clean drinking water, quality educational systems, public transportation, healthcare for all, the right to vote, and quality of life. Miranda and his creative team worked collaboratively to make great art that not only tells the story of the founding of our country, but is a piece of social activism and commentary. Also imagines a future where America and the diversity of its people are reflected not only on the stages of Broadway, but also in the cabinet of the White House and the seats of Congress. Perhaps the greatest impact of Hamilton is a reflection, the questions and the conversations it has inspired. What does it mean to be American? What stories are told and who tells them? And to quote the closing lines of the musical, who lives, who dies, and who tells your story? Thank you. So I think Fran will be joining me with several of your questions. Please feel free, if you have more, to put them in the chat bar for Q&A. And I look forward to being able to answer them right now. So I see I have a question asking if I have read Ron Chernow's book. I have read Ron Chernow's book. It took quite a while because Ron, as a true historian, footnotes everything. And I'm someone who truly enjoys those Easter eggs or those rabbit holes. So the second he links to a particular letter or he links to a particular primary source document, I'm immediately online trying to find a digital copy so I can read the letter that was based on or read the decree or item that he used in his research. Oh my gosh, if I saw Hamilton live, I've seen Hamilton live many, many times. The first was in February 2015 off Broadway within the first couple of weeks of it opening ever, which was just an incredible, astonishing experience. Then I had a chance to go back later that year and see the cast on Broadway at the Richard Rodgers Theater. I also saw the replacement cast in New York, the first replacement cast. I saw it in Chicago, and I had a chance to see it at our beautiful Overture Center in Madison just this past season. So this question from Deb Piper. Nice to see you, Deb. Lin is very busy all the time. He right now is focusing his efforts on several elements or several initiatives related to getting out the vote, making sure people are registered and able to use their vote in the upcoming presidential election. He also has been encouraging everyone to take part in the census. And I think this week he debuted a new documentary that is about his father, and it's his father telling his life story and sharing that with everybody. So I'm so looking forward to seeing that as well. So I see a question from Jesse James White. I'm curious if you could speak more about the cabinet, specifically while a diverse group, there were no women involved in this musical's development. Well, first I would say the cabinet goes back to the mid 2000s. So they were working on In the Heights in 2005, 2006, 2007. And a few of the members had crossed paths while they were college students, but at that point they were all in their early 30s, late 20s. And they coalesced together, partially being introduced by the producer and partially just by knowing each other as friends or as people working in the same circle and same fields. So when you have a creative team that really works together and works well, that's why the team was able to just pick up and keep working and not have to spend all this time getting to know each other and go right from In the Heights eventually into Hamilton. With that said, they made a concerted effort with the creative team for Hamilton to involve women in the process while women are not the lead directors or designers, because they did bring most of the team from In the Heights forward to Hamilton. Many of the assistant positions, the assistant lighting designer, people on the costume team, the assistant choreographer, the dance captain, were all women. So women were part of the process in creating Hamilton. I have a question from Michaela Sullivan Fowler. Hi, Michaela. And she says, how is Broadway faring in the time of COVID? Not well. If I'm going to be honest, not well at all. There was a story in the New York Times in the middle of September called One Lost Weekend. If you have a chance to Google that, just Google One Lost Weekend, New York Times, that shared the impact of one weekend of lost work in New York for restaurants, for the 30 plus Broadway shows, for everybody working in the hotel industry. It's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. Those of us who work in the entertainment sector have not been able to perform since the middle of March, and will be one of the last sectors to return. I mean, think about it. When you go to a show, the great thing about the show is that you are in a theater, you're in a beautiful venue, and you're sitting right next to somebody else, and everyone's having this communal experience. And right now with COVID, that's not possible in the United States. Now, it's not to say it won't ever happen again. Taiwan never had to shut down. I have friends who are right now singing opera in Germany and performing, and they have audiences back together, masked but safe. So it will happen again, but it's really tragic what's happening for the entire arts entertainment industry across the country and particularly in New York City right now. My guess is that it's going to be for Broadway. It's going to be 2022 before Broadway can return, just because of the nature of the business and the nature of performing. What's my favorite scene in Hamilton? Okay, all right, this is super nerdy, but I'm guessing that you probably have all figured out that I already am super nerdy, so it won't be surprising. I love how you have the song Helpless in the Winter's Ball, and it's told from Eliza's perspective. And then literally the stage, just like if you were using a hip hop record, the stage revolves and goes backwards, and the music goes backwards. And then you see the entire scene again through Angelica's perspective in Satisfied. And that I think is just an incredible feat of choreography, of stage technology, of storytelling. And then it really does show, I mean, I'm sure you've all these experiences where you and your friend are at the same thing and you have totally different versions of what happened, right? I just think that's brilliant. Dan Plummer asks, do Miranda's other works live up to Hamilton? Oh, that's a tough question. I think there are strengths, and there's strengths in all of his work. I'm sure some parents out there might have seen and watched and listened to Moana, which is a show that he contributed much of the music to. It's a movie, a Disney film. I think that's an astonishing work of art, and absolutely love that film. In the Heights, I've spent a lot more time studying it since I got interested in Hamilton, and I'm so looking forward to the film, which should be coming out next summer with Anthony Ramos in the title role. I think I love looking at all of his work because there's something, well, there's a through line. You also can see his growth as an artist, taking from In the Heights through 21 Chump Street, looking at Love Style Supreme. So it's just a way to appreciate his talents and the talents of the people that he works with. There's a question from Luan Dang that says, do they plan to switch to live broadcasting? So I'm guessing this might be about, will Broadway maybe broadcast live? So there are a few ways that you can watch recordings or live recordings of Broadway. So Hamilton, the Disney Plus film of the stage production, they filmed over 3 days. They filmed live performances with an audience, but then they had the opportunity to edit together different parts of the show if they needed different shots or something didn't quite work in a particular performance. I think that's more likely to happen. It has been happening for many years with public televisions, with PBS's great performances. They usually partner with 1 or 2 productions a season. And it's also been happening with Broadway HD, which is a subscription like a Hulu or Netflix for Broadway. But I don't see it being anything where they immediately live stream a performance, because there's so many things that can go wrong. And imagine you tune in for a live stream and then it doesn't work. You lose all your audience, right? So I think it'll be more likely that they film a live production and then they take that film and share it. All right, it looks like we are almost out of time. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. It was great to get a chance to answer your questions and to be here and to talk about Hamilton. With that, I'd just like to send one more thank you out to Deja Mason and to Fran Quello for the invitation, and to everybody at True Productions on the behind the scenes for today's event. I'm looking forward to seeing you at some point, all hopefully in the theater soon. Thank you.